The world breaks everyone, and afterward many are strong.
The Rule of Jenny Penn is one of those films that digs deep into the most unsettling corners of human psychology, all while pulling its audience through an uncomfortable maze of manipulation, power, and fear. Welcome back to your nerdy show. I'm your host, Spoiler Master. At its core, it's a psychological horror film that doesn't rely on overt supernatural elements, but rather the suffocating hold that one individual can have over others when they're allowed to run unchecked. Through its chilling portrayal of the elderly at a care facility, The Rule of Jenny Penn forces viewers to question what it really takes to stand up to a bully and how that fight can sometimes end in a disturbing form of victory.
Clear that lot over there. Give them toys to play with like children. Some of them think they are.
Stefan's struggle in the assisted living facility. At first glance, the story might seem relatively straightforward. You have Stefan, a retired judge who's recovering from a stroke, trying to adjust to life in an assisted living facility. But this seemingly mundane setting becomes a battleground for psychological torment as Stefan finds himself the target of Dave Creeley, an elderly man with a twisted obsession. Dave doesn't just bully Stefan, he dominates the entire facility through his puppet, the titular doll, Jenny Penn. The doll itself is never truly supernatural in nature, but it takes on an eerie, almost otherworldly presence in Dave's hands, symbolizing his control over the other residents.
Don't you think?
The power of Jenny Penn, Dave's tool for terror. David, however, doesn't wield power in a traditional sense. Instead, his power comes in the form of a creepy doll, Jenny Penn. This doll is not just an object, it becomes the focal point of Dave's cruelty. He uses it as a weapon, manipulating the residents and staff alike by giving it a voice and a sense of authority. Jenny Penn becomes his way of asserting control over the powerless elderly, forcing them to obey his every command. Dave's twisted therapy involves him using the doll as a tool for terror, bullying the patients into submission by making them interact with it in disturbing ways. For Stefan, the doll represents everything that's wrong with this place, a symbol of manipulation and cruelty, both in its physical presence and in the way it makes people behave.
The brown, knees up Mother Brown, come along dearie, let it go.
Dave Creeley, a villain with no grand motivation. What sets Dave apart from the typical villain is his lack of a grand motivation or backstory. Unlike other villains who are driven by some deep-seated grudge or personal vendetta, Dave's reason for targeting Stefan seems almost trivial. Dave admits at one point that he's only ever seen Stefan once before, back when Stefan was a judge in his prime. Stefan, as an authority figure, symbolized everything that Dave resented: control, status, and power. Now, in the diminished setting of the care facility, Dave is in a position where he can exact his own form of revenge by psychologically tormenting Stefan, relishing in the fact that someone once deemed above him is now under his control. There's no grand motive beyond a simple desire to break Stefan's spirit, to take pleasure in having power over someone who would otherwise be out of his reach.
See you tonight.
I'd like to make an official...
The subtle methods of Dave's psychological torment. Dave's tactics are as subtle as they are menacing. He uses his knowledge of the facility, where he once worked, to manipulate the system. He knows the facility's layout, its blind spots, and how to work around the staff. This allows him to set up his own private space to isolate Stefan and others, furthering his reign of terror without suspicion. The care staff, distracted with other patients or simply oblivious to the suffering happening under their noses, fail to see the toll Dave is taking on the other residents. This indifference is key to understanding why Dave is able to carry out his cruel schemes without consequence. He's perfected his act as a frail, mentally unstable old man, and no one questions his behavior. Stefan's mental struggle, trying to resist Dave's control. For Stefan, the initial challenge is not just to survive this psychological onslaught, but to resist falling into the same trap that ensnares the other residents. Dave uses Jenny Penn as a tool of fear, and the doll seems to take on a life of its own as the film progresses. At times, the doll's expressions change. It even appears to grow in size or become more imposing. But these strange phenomena could just as easily be reflections of Stefan's deteriorating mental state. His stroke has left him struggling with memory lapses, confusion, and hallucinations. The doll's transformation may not be supernatural in nature, but rather a manifestation of Stefan's increasing paranoia and psychological collapse. His struggle isn't just physical, it's a battle for his sanity. The bond between Stefan and Tony. As the movie continues, it becomes evident that Stefan's resistance to Dave's cruelty is a slow and painful process. The judge, who once commanded respect in a courtroom, now has to relearn how to stand up for himself. In the beginning, Stefan is aloof and distant, unwilling to engage with the other residents. But as he begins to form a connection with Tony, another patient at the facility, he starts to open up. This relationship becomes crucial for Stefan's survival and eventual triumph. Tony, though also broken by Dave's behavior, offers Stefan a path forward, a way to fight back.
He's the menace here. He's been at me from the jump.
Stefan and Tony's revenge on Dave Stefan's decision to take action is not one made lightly. By the time Stefan and Tony plan their revenge on Dave, the latter has already pushed them both to their breaking points. Their response is extreme. They lure Dave into a secluded laundry room and suffocate him with blankets. This act of violence is shocking, not just because of its brutality, but because it signals the end of Dave's reign of terror. It's a grim and decisive moment that brings with it a twisted sense of liberation. The care facility, after all, is a place where the elderly are meant to feel safe, but under Dave's rule, it had become a prison. Killing Dave is not a joyous act. It's a necessary one for the victims to reclaim their lives. The aftermath. Stefan's unintended peace. However, the film doesn't end on the dark note that one might expect. Although Stefan and Tony have committed murder, there are no consequences for their actions. The staff, who had previously ignored the growing suffering at the hands of Dave, now treat his death as an unfortunate but natural event. The patients who had lived in fear of Dave now find peace. Tony and the others experience a sense of relief, and Stefan, who had been a solitary figure at the beginning of the film, is now able to bond with the other residents. He plays games with them, and for the first time in the film, Stefan seems genuinely content.
The world breaks everyone, and afterward many are strong at the broken place.
A bleakly optimistic ending, the cost of freedom. The ending of The Rule of Jenny Penn is, in a way, a tragic triumph. It's clear that the film's creators want us to question the morality of Stefan's actions. While his decision to murder Dave could be seen as an act of justified self-defense, it's also a disturbing commentary on the lengths to which someone might go when pushed to their limits. Stefan's violence may have led to the immediate end of the suffering for him and the other residents, but it also leaves a lingering question. How far is too far when fighting back against a bully? Is murder ever the right solution, even when it seems to bring peace?
Be a waste not to honor that, don't you think?
Jenny Penn, a symbol of control and fear. The film's bleakly optimistic ending suggests that sometimes breaking free from tyranny requires extreme measures. The death of Dave Creeley marks the end of an era of psychological abuse at the care facility, but it also forces us to confront the darkness that resides in all of us when we're pushed to the edge. Stefan's journey is one of survival, and in the end, it's not just his body that recovers, but his spirit. However, the price of that recovery is steep, and it's something that Stefan will have to live with for the rest of his life.
Or even lift a finger. That's if you...
The final act, Stefan's reclamation of agency. Ultimately, The Rule of Jenny Penn is a deeply unsettling film because it doesn't offer easy answers. It asks tough questions about power, control, and the lengths we'll go to when we're backed into a corner. The doll, Jenny Penn, is both a symbol of Dave's cruelty and a reflection of the dark side of human nature, a constant reminder of how fragile our minds can be when we're subjected to cruelty and manipulation. In the end, Stefan's destruction of the doll, burning it after Dave's death, is symbolic not only of the end of Jenny's rule, but of his own reclaiming of agency. It's his way of saying, "I'm free." But whether or not he can ever truly escape the trauma of his experiences is another question entirely. Our nerdy thoughts. That's it for today's analysis of The Rule of Jenny Penn. It's a film that challenges us to think about the lengths one might go to for freedom and the price of survival. What did you think of the ending? Was Stefan's action justified, or was it a step too far? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more in-depth movie breakdowns. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.
No, what the heck, I'll laugh anyway.